You know, from secret societies in the early republic all the way to New Age movements in the 20th century, American history has this hidden mystical side. It's a really fascinating story of spiritual seeking that has shaped the nation in some pretty surprising ways. But it's also sparked a fierce debate about culture, ownership, and respect. All right, let's dive into this complex history.
So get this. It sounds like something out of a movie, but it's totally true. After the heartbreaking death of their 11-year-old son, President Abraham Lincoln and his wife Mary Todd Lincoln actually turned to spiritualism, and they reportedly held séances right inside the White House, hoping to make contact with their lost child. Now, this isn't just some weird piece of historical trivia. It shows that from the very beginning, mysticism reached the absolute highest levels of American society.
And that's really the core idea we're exploring here. These mystical beliefs weren't just a sideshow, they were deeply woven into the fabric of the nation. This wasn't some fringe element. It was a consistent, powerful undercurrent that shaped politics, culture, and how Americans saw their entire world.
Okay, so first up, let's pull back the curtain on this secret history and see just how deep these roots really go.
I mean, just take a look at this timeline. This stuff is not new. Way back in the 1790s, right after the Revolution, there was this huge panic about the Illuminati supposedly taking over. Then, in the early 1800s, you've got groups like the Freemasons and Rosicrucians becoming really influential. The Civil War, with its unimaginable loss of life, caused a massive surge in spiritualism. And by the late 1800s, you have movements like Theosophy bringing Eastern religious ideas into the American mainstream. It's a long, continuous story.
And you don't have to dig through old history books to see how mainstream these ideas became. Seriously, just pull a dollar bill out of your wallet. That Eye of Providence, the pyramid, it's an iconic symbol, right? Well, it was FDR's Vice President Henry A. Wallace who was the guy who pushed to get it on there. Wallace, a high-ranking Freemason who actually called himself a practical mystic, personally took credit for putting that symbol on the nation's currency.
So all of this history, it really sets the stage for what happens in the 20th century and the rise of what we now call the New Age movement.
You can kind of get the whole vibe of the movement just from this image, right? A lot of spiritual seekers felt totally disconnected from mainstream religion. They started looking for wisdom in other places, and for a whole bunch of them, that search led them straight to interpretations of indigenous American traditions.
So what was the New Age movement exactly? Well, it came out of the 1960s counterculture, and it wasn't like one single organized religion. It was more of a diverse collection of beliefs and practices. The one common thread was this feeling that mainstream Western religions were just spiritually empty. New Agers were on a personal quest for growth and universal truths, and they felt totally free to borrow from any tradition that spoke to them.
But why that particular focus? Well, for a lot of these seekers, native traditions seemed to offer everything they felt was missing in modern life. They believed it promised a profound connection to the earth, to nature, and an authentic, ancient spirituality that they felt the West had completely lost.
But here's the thing. This search, no matter how sincere the intentions might have been, didn't just happen in a bubble. It led, almost inevitably, to a really profound cultural clash.
To really get why this clash was so intense, there's a super useful idea from communication studies called encoding/decoding theory. The gist is this: a message, like a spiritual practice, isn't just sent and received. The original culture encodes it with all this meaning and history, but the receiving culture decodes it using a completely different filter, a different set of experiences. And when those filters are worlds apart, misunderstanding isn't just a possibility, it's pretty much guaranteed.
And this is where that theory just clicks into place. Look at these two different frames. From the Native American perspective, spiritual knowledge isn't some abstract idea you can just download. No, it's tied to specific communities, to the land, and to history. It comes with deep responsibilities. But the New Age seeker was decoding all of this through a totally different frame, where spiritual truth is universal and can't be owned. The focus was on the individual's journey and personal growth. These are just fundamentally different ways of seeing the world.
This massive clash of perspectives brings us right to the heart of the debate. Was this cultural theft, or was it just a natural evolution of spiritual ideas?
Well, for many Native Americans and their advocates, the answer was crystal clear. This quote from a 1984 conference of the American Indian Movement. I mean, it doesn't mince words. It frames the issue not as some misunderstanding, but as theft, a direct attack on the very identity and survival of their people.
So let's break that argument down. Critics see this as just the latest chapter in centuries of colonial exploitation, just in a new spiritual form. They argue it trivializes sacred traditions, turning them into weekend workshops and commercial products.
It lets seekers adopt this romanticized image of Indianness, while completely ignoring the very real ongoing political and economic struggles Native communities face. And the result, they say, is a cheap, bastardized spirituality that actually mocks the original.
Okay, but that's not the only way to look at this. There is a counter-argument. Some scholars, like Michael York, suggest that this kind of borrowing isn't the exception. It's the historical rule. From this perspective, cultural exchange is a natural, even inevitable, part of how religions grow and change over time. So from this point of view, the interest wasn't motivated by malice, but by genuine respect. Proponents argue that cultural mixing is how religions have always evolved. I mean, think about how Christianity absorbed pagan holidays, for example. They also point out that some Native individuals chose to share their knowledge, hoping it would build bridges of understanding. In this light, what was created wasn't theft, but a new, hybrid spirituality that was adapted for modern life.
So where does all this leave us? To find some clarity, let's zoom out. Because this specific conflict, it isn't an isolated event. It's part of a much larger recurring pattern in American culture. Think of it like a four-step cycle that just keeps repeating. It starts with a group feeling spiritually unfulfilled by the mainstream. This leads to a search for something more authentic, which they often find in marginalized or non-Western cultures. Then, as it gets popular, these complex traditions get simplified and commercialized for a mass audience, and this almost inevitably leads to a conflict with the original culture over who has the right to these practices and what they truly mean.
And once you see this pattern, you start seeing it everywhere. It happened with early American groups like the Shakers, who were seen as a radical departure. We just saw it with the New Age interest in Native spirituality. And you can definitely argue we see it today, with the transformation of yoga from an ancient spiritual discipline into a multi-billion-dollar wellness industry. The pattern just repeats. Ultimately, the story of Occult America is more than just a secret history of seeking. It's a story of these clashing worldviews. And it leaves us with a profound and unresolved question for our own time. In a world where ideas and cultures mix at lightning speed, can a spiritual tradition truly be owned? And if so, who gets to decide?